Welcome to Swift Coaches Academy, a podcast dedicated to bringing exercise and health professionals the uncensored truth behind what it really takes to succeed in the health industry with me, your host, Zenia Wood. As an accredited exercise physiologist and the founder of Swift Coaches Academy with almost a decade of experience, I'm on a mission to transform the lives of ambitious health professionals who want more and are ready to take action to create incredible impact and financial freedom. So join me as I speak candidly with industry leaders about the struggles and successes from within the trenches through thought-provoking conversations.
In this episode, Zenia chats with Alicia Gowans, who is not only a 3-time World Champion Bodybuilder, but also a personal trainer, accredited sports and nutritionist, and a physique prep coach with over 20 years of experience and several degrees under her belt. Ali is the face of Ali's Angels, a prolific brand both on and offline, having won several international coaching awards and over 500,000 Instagram followers. This woman walks the walk better than anyone, and today's conversation dives deep into how to become an incredible coach and create a lasting impact in their professional careers.
Alicia Gowans, how are you?
So good. So good. Thank you so much for having me on. I was excited to come on.
My pleasure. I mean, obviously we've been working together for, I think it's like 5 or 6 years now.
A very long time now. Very
wild.
long time. Every now and then I find old videos of like the early days and I'm like,
my God.
Wow.
Baby
I
Zenia.
remember those, oh God, what were they called? You put the barbell in my arm,
The Zercher.
The Zercher squats. The first time I ever did a Zercher squat. Hello, Zenia. Brought me into the world of Zercher squats because remember we couldn't do anything else at all. Legitimately, at the time we were working back, we'd regressed all the way we could to work our way back up. But yes, I do. I find some of those videos and think about our humble beginnings, and it's, you know, it's really lovely to see how far we've both come together, but then independently in that time too.
Absolutely. And just to, I guess, rewind a little bit because we sort of jumped ahead. I have been Ali's exercise physiologist for about 5 or 6 years. And I remember originally the notes I wrote on my form was that it was meant to be for 3 months, but to get you like out of pain. And so
6 years later, we still do things together. She's still my preferred physiologist, and she is actually, you know, one of our team of allied health specialists in my own business. She is our number one go-to for this specific space. So, you know, just goes to show you, right? 3 months turned into an eternity.
Yeah. And I think, you know, for the coaches listening who are looking to become better coaches, that really comes down to the value that was provided for it. And, you know, you being a 3-time world champion bodybuilder and also having internationally recognized coaching awards in your own right as well. So not only are you an elite world champion athlete that I've had the pleasure to work alongside and do the rehab to support you with that, but I guess what I'd love to talk about today is also you as a coach and your technical abilities and how that's evolved, and then also how exercise physiology has complemented what you're doing, because I mean you and I are very clear on our own scopes of practice not 100%. Being the same, and so we can really integrate quite well with clients and work together. So maybe we'll start with your journey from itty bitty early PT days to where you are now, the education process.
And I think this is probably a cool way to start it, because the value that I see in, you know, your space, your sphere and your niche, the area that you know, your scope sits around, probably comes because it's where I started. So for anyone that hasn't heard anything about my journey or hasn't listened to any of the podcasts where I've shared this before, I actually did all of my initial qualifications to then, you know, go on the floor and do PTing as part of an excellence in sport program that ran through my year 11 and 12. And essentially it gave me the very first year of my human movement, so exercise science and human movement degree. And I then had the capacity to go on after graduating and pursue that degree or change. And at the time, it wasn't as lucrative of a space as it is now. So with a lot of, encouragement from my family, I changed directions, and I didn't pursue it as a undergraduate at that point in time. But I took what I had done, had my qualifications, and moved into the space of being able to still do my personal training on the side. I continued over the years, though, to upskill and do literally every single course that was made available in any area of interest that I felt would grow my, my specialties and my expertise. I always had this coaching business on the side. And obviously, for 12 years, it was not, the internet was not a thing, and it was not a, big online presence. You literally had to walk up to people on a treadmill, say hi, introduce yourself, and show them that, you could change their life in some way in order to even get clients. It really was a word of mouth, results orientated type promotional space back then. It's evolved so much, and I guess my career and my coaching has evolved along with it. But the other side of my education and where I went down the path of has lent itself greatly to what I do, and it's 100%, I think, made a lot of the differences in the value proposition in the way that I coach. And it is definitely a cornerstone of what makes me probably very different from other coaches in the industry. And it's because I went on to do undergraduates in psychology and it was in commerce. So I worked in the space of, human resources, did a lot of study in cognitive behavioral change and in corporate change management. So coaching was a massive underpin of everything that I did on the undergraduate side, and then moved into nutrition because it became my passion. So, and still is. That now is the space that I tend to focus on mainly, but I obviously encompass, all things. And as I said, the coaching that I got in the corporate space and in those specific streams that I studied has really been, oh my God, it just underpins everything that I do. It's really been an exponential advantage in this coaching space. And it made the transition from floor-based work to online really easy for me, because I had these coaching methodologies and frameworks that I applied to an online strategy, and took all of my experience from the space on the floor in person, which I think you just can't be profoundly great online if you haven't got that under your belt. It really did lend itself to that really smooth transition across. And I made the call to go fully online before online was the cool thing to do, largely because I just had to. I was in a relationship that had me between two states. We were traveling a lot. Like, I just couldn't do the bricks and mortar anymore. So I really pushed hard and took everything online. And then about probably 4 years later, things started to move predominantly like internet based was going to be the next big thing. And then COVID hit. So it forced everyone online, right? But that's sort of it in a nutshell. We're sort of, we're cramming 20 years worth of stuff into as little space of time as I can. But that's it. That's how I sort of started and then gravitated through to here. And, over the course of those years, I've done multiple degrees, postgraduate. I've done, postgraduate studies in nutrition, and I have done a lot of work and space in, mentorships and in, short courses and in ongoing professional development when it comes to all things strength, conditioning, rehabilitation, like you name it, I've done it. I've done those mainly because I like to understand things for myself to the nth degree. It's not because I profess to be an expert in any of those spaces. I don't. I have aces in their places. I use that term, quite frequently, because I believe that that's what makes your business robust, when you can say, hey, look, that's this specific issue. I've got this specific ace up my sleeve. Zenia, step on in. This is where she's going to work with you, because that's her zone, that's her field, that's her scope of practice. It falls outside of mine. And I think, that probably also sums up how the transition for my business has gone as well. It's gone from being just a one-woman band in a one-on-one process on the floor, to then being a one-woman band online, to then being a team, and then a team of specialists, and then a team of specialists with a digital administrative support team, and then an allied health team of specialists within our umbrella, so that everyone works within their scope of practice always. Anyway, how does that go, Zenia? Does that help?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to fill in the blanks with that. So going back to the start, when you were, you know, grabbing people on the treadmill and just adding value, if we can wind back then, to now being, I guess, quite niche and prolific in the space of, I guess, you know, you sort of recently with your new bub transitioned into the wellness and pregnancy and everything to do with women's health, but you've also, you know, you have a very strong foundation and your awards coming from bodybuilding and like high level. So how did that transition happen? Were you always wanting to do that when you started, or you just kind of get anyone?
Okay, so interestingly, the exercise in sport, so the excellence in sport program that I ran, it was literally around performance enhancement within a specific sport. So I was looking at specificity of how you applied different you know, protocol structures, programming to yourself, and across the course of the 2 years you had to increase your ranking within whatever sport you played at a representative level. So I had to coach myself on paper and present it at the end of these 2 years in a similar format to what I do with, you know, all of my athletes. So it was taking myself through, you know, development phase, you know, a preparatory phase, and then a competition phase, looking at prepping myself for, you know, sport specific periods. So where I was actually priming myself with the right nutrition, I was actually looking at how I was loading my programming and my conditioning blocks. Like, it was pretty intense, but it was super cool. And I fell in love with it. Hey,
it sounds epic.
It really was. They don't even offer it anymore. And I find that, you know, super disappointing, because it was such an incredible course format. And like I said, it covers you off of, well, technically you were the whole first year completed within that degree. Plus there was a couple of RPLs in the next section. So it was pretty cool. But it was applied, and that's what I really loved. Like, I fell into that whole, wow, you know, you were tangibly watching yourself improve, you know, in the performance of your own sport, but also, you know, aesthetically as well. So I was playing across 2 different sports, so 2 completely different formats that I was applying to a lot of the stuff that I was doing on myself. I was doing hockey at the time, so that was one of my sports, and then I was also doing basketball. So, which I know
and
sounds ludicrous because I'm so short, but I was very good at it. So I was doing these 2 sports, and I was working on, you know, how I would be applying these changes to myself. So I fell in love with this whole concept of being able to completely enhance, you know, the way that you performed in a specific or given sport based upon how you applied yourself in the gym, and, you know, how you looked after your food. So that started the whole interest, peak, passion for me. And then it literally just carried across to my training with clients. And what I found was I was naturally gravitating towards, and I had people naturally gravitating towards me too, I guess, that was sport specific. So I didn't really get a lot of the Ma and Pa kettle type clients. I had people that were coming to me that were, you know, playing quite high levels, soccer, boxing. I had a couple of AFL ladies. I had, you know, a couple of swimmers. So it was cool because I was working in that space more than I was, and working with people that, you know, even though they might have been hobby athletes to a degree, some of them, they're still more athlete minded than they are gen pop, right? So I worked with them predominantly in the first few years. I did have some gen pop, but it wasn't the crux of what I worked with. And then when I developed and designed my studios, I had a couple of performance studios. They again really did attract more so people that were looking to get into a higher level within their own sport, or starting to look at competitions. And that's because I had started to, you know, compete myself. So I was in the scene, and then starting to have, you know, more and more people gravitate towards me in that space. And then I went on to do my competition accreditation. So there's actually a physique based accreditation program you can do once you're at a certain level, you know, with the SNA. And I went on to do that. And I was one of the first, I think there was only 10 of us in that first intake, that we were the first ones to do the course once it was actually
and that
run
was
live.
SNA is Sports Nutrition Australia, right?
Sports Nutrition Association Australia. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And then to do that, you know, you had to be post-grad qualified to start that process. And it was, it was fantastic. It really just solidified a lot of what I had been doing with a lot more structure and a lot more, a lot more recognition, a lot more backing. And there's definitely credibility that comes with being an accredited and qualified coach. So I did that. That was about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And it's just evolved since then. I think COVID took us down a bit of a different space. Personally, that's when we went through and undertook our IVF journey. And I became a lot more focused on overall wellness, longevity, health, vitality in my own journey as I was, trying to optimize fertility. And then in the pregnancy, managing myself. And it's just really expanded my views on a lot of things. And COVID at the time had hit, and we saw a massive slowdown on everything sport related, because all of a sudden there was no sports being run, there were no games being played, there were no stages to be stood on. So all of my athletes across all sporting spheres were down and out. So what we were starting to work with then was transitioning people into, well, how do you stay mentally sound during this time, and how do we continue to move our bodies so that we, reduce our likelihood of actually falling ill or being as ill as what we might be. So we started then moving a little bit more wellnessy, is the way that I would probably describe it. And it was beautiful space to move into, actually. And I've taken a lot of personal enjoyment in it, which surprised me because I hadn't really played in that space. I didn't really think that I would feel that way about it, but I have. And so now we have a real 50-50 mix in our business. Our business has evolved again, and we have, I would say 50% is wellness and lifestyle, and 50% is competitor and sport specific performance-based training.
Yeah. And so how do you, you're a woman of a million talents, but how do you manage navigating two different niches and trying to, I guess, work with both?
Look, I think that a lot of the underlying principles are the same, right? It's just with one side of the coin, they tend to be, and I won't say all of them because all of them are not all athletes are that educated around food or around, good habits. Some of them just literally rely on genetics. But I would say that, mainly my athletes are a little bit more educated, have a little bit more framework around nutritional literacy, and also a little bit more advanced in their training capacity inside of a gym, right? Versus more your wellness / lifestyle. So the real difference is you're putting on a little bit more of a coaching / educator hat with one, and then the other one, it's more coaching / performance with the other. So most of the basics are the same in the sense of, good food, good training protocols, good form, sleep, recovery. All your focus points are still the same. It's just difference in, which areas you're highlighting more on. And you've obviously got one part of the coin being more educated than the other. That's it. So I think that's maybe why I like the wellness space so too, because you have the capacity to actually set these people up for, success ongoing by literally giving them a solid and robust framework of the basics and basic habits and rituals that are needed in order to be successful, right? Empowering people with the tools to be able to make better decisions themselves. There's some real serious satisfaction in that process.
Yeah. And so obviously you've done honestly more courses and degrees than I've ever met of anyone in my life before. You're always like, I've got an exam. And I'm like, what are you even studying?
What are you studying now?
What are you doing? This like very niche topic on nutrition or some exercise thing that I just loved for the last, 3 months. And you're like, I've started.
I've done that my whole life. Like I've done that my whole life. Even when I was in corporate, I think I ended up studying that much stuff that we couldn't fit all the numerals for, and all of the abbreviations for all of the qualifications I had on the back of a business card. So it became a running joke that, we just literally put the two main ones and we left the rest. Because once I get interested in an area, that's it. I'm straight down at rabbit hole. I want to know everything about it, get into it, get into the trenches, and then come back out and apply what I can, use what I want, move on to the next thing, right? Geez, if you stop learning, you become stagnant. You become stagnant, you become redundant, right? So I think the key to anyone being successful is continuously progressing self, progressing knowledge, and working in a space of passion wherever you can, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So out of the 20 plus, pieces of paper and things that you probably have on your wall at home, what do you think were the most impactful or the biggest lessons that you learned throughout the education? Because you've obviously niched down into nutrition, you've done, women's fertility, you've done optimization of sport specific. What do you think's maybe some key courses that you've done, or where you really sort of changed your opinion on something and
oh man, look, I think science is science, so my opinion gets changed. I wouldn't say frequently, because I don't think that there's overwhelming directional change in science super frequently to begin with. Science is such a long process for it to come to the point of the practitioner being able to use what comes out of it. But there is definitely stuff that comes up where I'm like, oh wow, okay, I would have thought this all those years ago, and I'm the polar opposite now. And I have no hesitation in that. I have a very flexible mindset when it comes to being open to alternative methods and or having a viewpoint changed if the data suggests that it should be, right? You can't compete with evidence. So yes, there's been plenty of things over the years. Look, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is, and I think the biggest issue that I have sometimes with undergraduates is that they don't give you everything that you would actually want to do. So you'll learn a lot of stuff where you're like, I spent a year of my life and then I threw it in the bin because I'm never going to use it again, right? And then you'll spend like this time in this one little pocket and you're like, I wish that was the whole degree. So I've had issues with that. And there's, that's the main reason why I never went on to do my full dietetics. And I focused more down the channel of sports nutrition, because I just didn't want to do clinical disease inside of hospital. And that was such a large portion of that process. And I'm not negating it. I think that, I work with dietitians. I outsource part of, our client load to dietitians when it's outside of my scope. And I absolutely value what they do, but I just personally never wanted to study and be stuck in that space. I didn't want to do, disease prevention. I wanted to do performance enhancement, performance support, right? So for me, going down the route that I did with my study with nutrition and working with, Sports Nutrition Association, working with, the international bodies that I'm with, it was just so much better for me. Like, it just made so much more sense. It gave me the tools to be able to apply to my practice immediately. It was specific to the areas that I was interested in. I didn't waste all this other time in zones and modules that, I was never going to use, right? So that was great. And then I've gone on to do, further education post that, but again, in the same format. And it's a bridging to then my master's, which I will start. I was going to start it this year, but I've thrown a few too many things on my plate and I don't think I can. So I think what's looking like 2024 will be the year I enroll in my master's for, the nutrition side of things. But
which is exciting.
It's very exciting. And I'm actually super excited for it because I already know what I want to do. Like, I already know what I want to spend time, in the research side of things on, and it's super interesting. And I know it hasn't been done. So I'm pumped for it. I would have liked to have started a couple of years ago, but, as you can tell, I've had 101 things going on, and this year isn't slowing down any either. So it'll be a next year thing. But that pathway didn't look traditional, right, at all. And it didn't follow the blueprint of leave high school, go to university, do 4 years, and then you're out and you're doing, it didn't look like that at all. And I guess my advice to people would be, look around and really get clarity, if you can, on the things that actually do interest you and what you want to do with a vocation before you choose the pathway for study. Because you'll be able to find a better way rather than doing, maybe something that's going to be cumbersome, take too long, not necessarily provide you with everything that you're looking for anyway. And that's going to make more sense to a lot of practitioners in your space, Zenia, once they're actually done their undergraduate, when they want to look to specialize. That makes a lot more sense. But, that's sort of how it looked for me. I also think that you need to look at the soft skills. So that's super important. When you're looking at coaching, like, I can't stress to you enough, if you are someone that cannot have a coaching level conversation with motivational interviewing, questioning, and, an element of understanding the human behavioral dynamics in choice and decision-making, and how to gravitate someone in a different direction through a coaching process, then you're just not going to gain the traction that you need to be a standout, because there are so many people in this space. There are so many options available to people that you need to be able to be someone that creates actual change. And those soft skills layered through the fabric of technical expertise is how you make that happen. So I would strongly suggest upskilling in the soft stuff. Don't shy away from that stuff. Find providers that can give those courses to you too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple of things that I really resonated with that you mentioned right back, sort of when you were talking about the courses that you really loved were those that were really practically applicable, and saying that, I wish that this one thing that was taught at uni was actually the whole degree. Reminds me of exactly why I created the educational mentorship program that we do.
Exactly.
Because it's 6 months, which is effectively like a year's worth of uni content just smashed into 6 months. And the whole premise is everything you wish you were taught at uni but weren't, in a practical way that's applicable, done by someone who's actually working in the industry, not a lecturer who sits behind a desk the rest of the time, who's actually got case study and client examples that they're working with at the time in the flesh. And I just think that is the huge piece that everyone comes out of uni and they're like, oh, I've got my piece of paper, but I have no fucking nothing. I don't know how to talk to a client. I don't know my technical skills. Ugh.
Exactly. And that's actually, a big part of what I see, even when you see, because this happens a lot in the industry, and I know we all know it happens. It's people that will go do something for 5 minutes and decide, oh, I want to go become that myself. I'm going to go throw my banner up. I'll do a 6-week course. I haven't worked in a face-to-face environment with people. I've got no actual one-on-one experience, but I'm now an online coach because I've got my qualification. We see that a lot. And what you're lacking there is a whole bunch of experience, hands-on, knowledge, learning the ropes of identifying and reading and assessing people. Like, there's so much more that is missed before you should go online. And I think, if you can take that Zen and put it into a blueprint in 6 months that takes this junior that's done there 4 years, but really hasn't got the online traction on the road yet, and give them more, I guess, more experience through your experience, then I think it's incredible what you're doing. And I would actually have to say that some of the best stuff I've done when it comes to, the strength and conditioning side and or rehabilitation and or even just advancing, some of the stuff that I've done in biomechanics has been when I've done these sorts of programs. They have been more hands-on with a industry leader in a small group format over a several month process, but covering off a massive amount of, curriculum in that time. And it's all been practical. So it's not been a case of sitting in a massive theater with hundreds of people, writing whatever I can down or taking notes, and then doing my best to try to apply it at some point later on. It's literally, you're doing it as you're learning it, and then you're discussing it, workshopping it, and reviewing it. It's totally different. And then for me, that's the stuff you have the capacity to take and apply to your direct consumer base straight away. There is rubber meets road immediately. You're not waiting for years to get the chance to hit the freeway. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So So I definitely think advice would be look for those options, look for the pathways that upskill you in those areas that you know you want to gravitate and create a niche in, or you're personally passionate about, or you see as a current gap in your own skill set. And that might be a soft skill, you know, because there are so many people out there that are leaders in their fields that are offering these sorts of formats that can help. And that's some of the, you know, some of the best stuff I've done. Like, I've really enjoyed it. And we've talked about me doing yours, and I think that will be my next one. I've done one with Kayla. I've done two with Kayla. I've done one with Dr. Kirkbride. I'm yet to do yours, but we will get me on it. And you know, look, I love doing them because, as I said, it's rubber meets road type stuff. It's immediately transferable to your own coaching process and coaching business, you know, and that's the stuff that's invaluable.
I think the thing too, right? Like, not even just the stuff that's practically applicable, but to go a step further. And I do love being able to be in the presence of world leaders and have these sort of weekend courses. However, I think the challenge with that is that you get word vomited at for the better part of a weekend. You do some practical stuff, absolutely. You get to ask some questions, but then 2 weeks later, you're like, oh, fuck, now I have a question and this isn't applicable in this scenario. And how do I do this? And so if there was a way to, like, and then it's like, okay, well, never talk to me again because you paid your money and I'm in a different city now. And so I think, you know, there's value and merit to those courses. Maybe if they had some ongoing support.
That's what I was just going to say. That's what I was just going to say. Like, I got to admit, I don't do the short ones like that. Like, I don't do the 2 days, 3 days. I do them
to network. I don't really do them for the content.
I don't do them because I just don't have time, right? If I'm going to invest time, it's literally, right, this is 6 months and it's layered into my schedule and my daily, you know, timeline before it even starts. So I know that I'm dedicating, committing that time and that, you know, effort. But it's also because I've identified it as having potential great return to me, right? Which is why I've chosen them. And, you know, this is the only reason I haven't done yours yet was because the timing of one of it just didn't work for me because I was already still finishing off another one and you'd already started. So for everyone listening, that's the only reason Zenia, because Zenia's was the first one that I spoke to about doing it, actually. So I think definitely look for those because they're invaluable. I also think do not become complacent and do not say that once you've reached a certain point that you know everything and there's nothing more to learn, because there is always something more to learn. Like, I've been doing this for a very long time, and the more I learn, the more I know that I know nothing. You know what I mean? Like, the more is that called the
Dunning-Kruger effect?
It's true. It's true. Like, the more I learn, the more I know I need to learn more, is the way that I would explain it. So I'm constantly evolving my skill set. And there are a lot of people I know that, you know, are peers of mine, colleagues in the industry, and they stopped undertaking personal development and courses and or mentorships and or, you know, tertiary education a long time ago because they valued, I guess they just didn't place the value on it. They thought that just being in the trenches now and I've learned this and that's all I needed. I've got my paperwork in order and I'm done. Now I'm just going to keep executing. But man, research changes. New evidence is always, you know, delivered. And if you're not at the cutting edge of that and then processing that and integrating that into your practice, then I think that you 100% are making yourself eventually redundant. So again, I think you've got to look at the fact that we're working in a field and an industry that is backed by science, and science is forever evolving. So why wouldn't we continue to evolve what we're doing in line with that? And you're only going to know that stuff if you're actually keeping up with it and you have an active presence in professional development. So I think professional development should be key. And if I was, you know, looking for my own coaching team, so for anyone listening to this too, it's probably interesting to know that I don't have one coach. I have several coaches in their relevant specialty areas that communicate with one another to work with me. And I choose them all individually because They are what I classify as thought leaders. So for me, a thought leader isn't someone that has just got or reached a certain level and a certain level of education, and that is it. They're people that are breaking barriers and constantly learning and constantly upskilling and constantly challenging others in the industry, because they're leveling up and things aren't necessarily, you know, they will challenge the status quo. Things aren't necessarily sitting with them. That is the standard. They want to raise the standard. So that's what I surround myself with. That's where I like to sit, because if I'm having those provocative conversations with people, then it's leveling me and my conversation up, and that's leveling my coaching conversations up. So I think it's a knock-on effect. And I think that would be my next piece of advice is choose your circle wisely and have an incredible panel of preferred specialists. You know, a team of people that you would 100% go to for different questions or support and or client support, should you need it, in different zones that are outside your specific niche or your specific scope.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And, you know, I guess that potentially blends into the conversation of how we integrate, and maybe some people would probably like to understand what that looks like, and how we've made that work, both me coaching you and then also how we as a team help coach others.
Yeah. So, you know, this is something I find super interesting. I've never understood it. Like that whole ownership theory where you get personal trainers where they're like, well, I'm not going to actually give you a program to do when you're not with me. I just want you to train with me. And I don't want you to go to a physio because they're going to tell you something stupid. You should definitely never see a dietitian or a nutritionist because I can just give you your meal plan on a napkin that I've written on my lunch break. Here you go. Like, I've never understood the concept, though, of thinking that if my person goes somewhere else, I'm going to miss out in some way. My thinking is, if I'm going to make change in this person's life, and I'm going to play a part in the change that will be profound for them in some way, I'm going to do everything right by this person. I'm going to make sure that every element that they need is covered off. And if it's something that is not inside my scope, I'm going to employ someone to do that part. Now, we have a B2B relationship that has been set up, and it's symbiotically beautiful because it allows Zenia to come in when I know someone needs very specific rehabilitative based programming and in-person support to be able to manage that function. And we communicate the whole way through the process. I will get constant emails through with updates. My client gives me updates. I am even capable, if I wanted to jump in on one of their Zooms at any point in time too. And we see progress and we report on progress, and we have milestone discussions that we sort of think people should be at certain times. So deliverables are discussed. It's you are 100% cohesively changing this person's circumstance, and it's usually moving them from pain, chronic pain, into a state of, you know, movement free of pain.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I want to engage someone to do that? And so that's where then it becomes a shared fee structure. You know, I don't take the full fee process when I'm not doing the full process with someone. They will then be paying partial payment to, you know, Zenia and her team for the part that they play. And then, you know, we have our part over here on this side. So it works beautifully together. It beautifully wraps up around a client and, you know, ensures that they are moved from one state to the preferred state safely. And for everyone listening, it keeps your insurances in check, people. Like, if nothing else, like, what the hell? I'm not practicing something that I'm not confident or comfortable to do so, and would be leaving my bottom line very exposed on, am I? You know, I'm not playing in these shades of gray and trying to be Zenia. I don't have hair colored like hers. I can't possibly imitate her if I tried. Definitely physically, absolutely not technically either. So I don't try to. I have aces in their places literally throughout my business for this specific reason. And if you're really smart and you set these relationships up, you're going to powerfully change people's lives. They're going to remember you for it. They're going to send people to you for it. They're going to grow both your business and your B2B partner's business because they have respect and they have, you know, gratitude for the change you've made in their life. And it's a
That's
relationship that's
huge.
built together. It
outside
is huge,
of the, you know, because people who are worried about, oh, it has to be my client, they're thinking this scarcity mindset of, you know, maybe they can't afford both of these things, but it's like they can't afford not to have you give them the gold standard approach to their healthcare.
Exactly.
And then, you know, their financial situation is not up to you. Your business is healthcare. Exactly. So don't provide them less healthcare because you maybe have a fear or something going on in your mindset that limits you from giving someone the best advice you possibly could.
So what I've always thought about this too is this. I have a very open cup strategy. I believe that the funnel should be remaining open always. I don't close it off. So I don't go, hey, I've just had 4 clients that have had a fall, an injury, a mishap, something, and now I've lost this part of my revenue stream because I've had to have them outsourced because I've done the right thing by looking after them, and I've put their needs above my own, in the sense of my job here is to move them to a better place and to leave them better than I found them, right? So I'm going to do that. So I've outsourced that function. Now it's gone from X dollars down to X dollars. I don't then go, well, oh my God, have a panic attack or have fear around that happening prevent me from sending them where they should go and doing the right thing. Instead, I have this mindset that goes, that's great. I'm helping these people. I'm putting that out there. I believe, hand on heart, that energy is going to flow back to me. My funnel stays open. And I can't stress enough, like I'm not talking the secret level bullshit, airy fairy stuff here, but I do believe that do the right thing, focus on the right things, and continue to help people, you will in fact have great referrals, leads, and you will have that revenue find you again. And then what I found always happens is you eventually get that person back on full revenue stream once again later down the track, maybe 6 months, maybe 12 months, once they're in that better state, and you've got additional revenue on your hands. So I often say to people, don't fear letting something go, because oftentimes letting that go opens space to be filled with more. And then when they do come back and then they bring their friends because they remember that you're the one that moved them past chronic pain, couldn't bend over and do their shoelaces, and all of a sudden they're doing RDLs and kicking goals and swimming, marathons, like, they're going to remember you. They're going to bring their friends and their family to you. So don't have that whole restricted, scarcity, fear-based mentality where you stop someone from, getting a pain-free movement, or you stop someone from progressing in their journey because you're trying to hold on to parts that you are not even within your right to actually hold on to them for. The stuff that sits outside your scope, outsource it every single time without fail or without second thought.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously that's, I guess, leads perfectly into why you outsource to work with me initially, because obviously it's no secret that you have a ton of knowledge when it comes to exercise performance, bodybuilding, all of that. And I, on the other hand, don't claim to be an expert in any of those areas, right? Like, rehab is my jam and my passion. And I think that's why we work so well together, because you're like, I wouldn't want to touch rehab. And I'm like, fuck nutrition. No, so we're both able to do that.
And what happened for everyone listening was that I had a client that had a couple of issues that was working with Zenia. And this is how I even met Zenia. I met her through her emails to tell me what was going on with my client, with her. And I was so impressed. I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like, I've never actually had an allied health specialist, external third party, even the ones that I actually had working relationships with, were never that professional, and never did they communicate with me like that proactively. I always had to chase shit up, right? I didn't have to chase anything. I had those reports in my emails every week, like clockwork. I didn't even have to think about what was going on with my client, and my client was getting better. So then, fast forward 3 or 4 months later, when I had this niggle and I was coming into a stage and I just knew it was getting to the pointy end of the stick. And if I didn't overcome that, I wouldn't have even made it to stage, which was my defending world title from my first win. I reached out and I was like, and everyone thought I was crazy. She was so junior at the time, and she was like
24.
She was
and I
a
shut my
baby.
pants when I got this
She was
email.
still working for someone, and this was the beautiful thing about our relationship. I loved her straight away. I saw a lot of potential in her straight away, and I wanted her to be a success, a screaming success. I wanted everyone to have access to her, and I wanted her to be able to create more of her. So I really pushed and encouraged her to break free of the corporate chokehold and do her own thing. And it's been both a pleasure and an honor to watch her flourish as a professional and as an individual in the last 6 years. I love seeing your success, but her success is merited and it's deserved. And she's very good at what she does. But she was a standout from day one for me as a B2B that then made me want to be a client. And then I fell in love with her as a person, but then continued to see the way that she kept evolving and growing and would take feedback on, and she would also take criticism on and then run with it in a way that was super positive. And she just went from strength to strength. And so for me, then it was a no-brainer that, hey, this is someone that I have no issue having my brand aligned directly beside, and I fill her books because I know she's going to deliver work like I would deliver and hire in the rehab space. And she's going to make my people be able to continue lifting, and she's going to bring them back from the brink of, complete demise. So that's what we've built over the last 4 or 5 years. And it's been incredibly successful and will continue to be an incredibly successful and mutually beneficial relationship for many years to come, because it's been built on, similar values, but also complete professionalism on both sides of the coin, delivering on, what we promised to deliver to our individual clients, but also to each other. So, I think that's how we came about. So we went from B2B to client, and then now a B2B relationship ongoing. She's one of my absolute elite preferred providers.
Thank you. That's so lovely to hear. And I remember when you said about those emails that I would send through weekly, I remember they were 2 p.m. on a Saturday, because I was like, no, I haven't done the rest of my work. I think that's the difference that sets apart the good coaches and the great coaches. It's like, what are you willing to endure and go through, and
absolutely,
continue to be consistent at your technical skills, obviously, and your business skills if you're running a business as well. But technically, it's just about creating incredible relationships and making sure that, like you said this whole time, refine your craft, learn some more, find new people. I've even done courses with people who I disagreed with, which I think is a topic that doesn't, people don't do that. They come in this echo chamber, they follow everyone in their own social media, and then they get shown more people that they're probably going to like. And it's like, I think we need to have more controversial conversations and have debates in a healthy way and go, hey, I don't agree with that, or what do you think? And so instead of me just going, oh, I fucking hate this person on Instagram, I was like, you know what? I'm going to pay $600 to go to a weekend course and tell it to their face and say, hey, I just don't get it, and not having to go at someone, but
have the capacity maybe to try to understand why they've approached it the way they've approached it, rather than just going, hey, slag it off, right? No, I totally get that. But this is what I mean when I say thought leaders, right? It's people that are challenging the status quo, that are happy to receive information and data, but also happy to challenge the bias and the nature of it. So, I love that. And everyone that, Zen is in my sphere is like that. And I totally relate, because very similar. And I think too, something else that's worth mentioning is, when it comes to coaching, I think you've got to take the view that you are 100% upskilling someone to eventually not need you, right? And if someone chooses to stay with you long-term, that's a really big sign that they've bought you beyond just what you're providing. They're continuing to buy you. But ideally, you want to be that coach that doesn't make a codependent and an incapable individual. You don't want it to be where they don't know how to, make those decisions or create structure for themselves.
Yeah,
I think that's
empower
super
them
powerful too.
And then have them hopefully want to work with you because they see,
Correct.
hey, you know, if you've taught them everything you know,
Correct.
then you're obviously not upskilling enough because they know everything you know and you haven't progressed beyond it.
This is my point. This is why I'm about to lead into next, that, you know, education is an eternal thing. It should never stop. It should be the crux of everything that you do. And I'm not saying you need to fill your entire life with it. I mean, I know to a degree I have, but you don't have to do that. You can choose to do one thing every 2 years, even if that's all you have time for. But I think it should still be a valuable thing, because people seeing you continuing to upskill, that is what's going to make them continue to want to learn from you, right?
Yeah.
Because you're still offering things of value. I think that's super important. But again, as I said, don't create dependency, create people capable of independent thought. I think that's really important.
No, I love that. And I think, you know, that sort of ties into like the education that we're providing as well, in terms of we have a masterclass coming up, our second one on anatomy of exercise. This one's on the shoulder. You should actually come along to it, because it'll be highly practical in terms of, we're not just like, here's the anatomy, learn it. We actually have methods to teach people how to learn muscle anatomy of anything without ever having any prior knowledge that I fucking wish I learned at uni.
See, this is one of those things, right, where you're like, I wish they taught it in this manner, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you learn after the fact, but yeah, so there's that. And then the other thing is we go into practical application of integrating anatomy of exercise with biomechanics, with being in an exercise setting, and how to periodize program and look at movements in a new light. That, you know, I mean, I remember doing glute med clam exercises till the cows come home at uni, but it's like no one teaches you how to recruit the entire lat through shoulder extension, adduction, internal rotation, lateral flexion of the hip in like a unilateral plane movement. And it goes so much deeper than what uni is, to their credit, like capable of being able to do in the time and the space and whatever they have. But
I've learned more, and I shit you not, I've learned more in my own rehabilitative practice over the years with my various, you know, situations, specifically with my back, than I ever learned in any of my undergraduate, and then I ever learned. Like, I 100% think that the practical application of all of it, once you get into the nitty gritty and you can go right down deep into the weeds, there is so much more to learn, right? And there's so much more to be looking at. So the stuff I did with you was great, because we worked on this massive regression. So I got to witness and then experience firsthand going from a complete powerlifting focus through to a completely regress. Like, my God, those Zercher squats.
And maybe it's helpful to tell people exactly what happened, like what your injury was and sort of that process for you as well.
So I full broke my back. Every time I say that, Christos gives me shit. He always, you know, does that whole spinal. That whole bloody quote. Anyway, yes, I broke my back. And I did it in a squat. So I had some stuff for a while that was a little bit, you know, psychosomatic anchoring to the movement pattern, as well as actually having ongoing issues. So,
and the like technically like the pars fractures, the discs, the sciatic pain and symptoms that you couldn't even fucking walk.
I had pars fractures, L4, L5. They were severe enough that they were like, you know, we're going to end up having full break if we don't manage this. So I was wearing a brace for, oh my God, like 4 months, I think, after I did it. I couldn't really do anything. Every hour on the hour, I was down on the ground doing rehabilitative based exercises. Like, it was full on. I couldn't walk properly at all. I had a multi-tier bilateral bulging disc structure. So not just a little bulge out, I'm talking both sides just, and pinching, contact to and impingement of in a couple, nerves. So I was having, weakness in legs giving out. I was having, like I said, issues walking. I couldn't bend over. I couldn't hip hinge at all. You remember, babe, I couldn't do an RDL.
Yeah.
It took me 6 years to get back to doing an RDL because I just couldn't get that hinge pattern right. And it sounds crazy, but when you go through that whole level of trauma, and then you're going through that chronic pain where it's like, the way I would describe it to people is I spent 4 years trapped inside a house where the fire alarm was going off 24/7, and I couldn't get out, and I couldn't turn the volume down, and I couldn't change the state of play. Like, it was horrendous. So my data, if we looked at my Oura Ring data from those years, it was horrible. My resting heart rate, my heart rate variability, like everything was just, I was a hot mess for a long time. And so a lot of what we did, I got used to this state being my normal, which is the most disgusting thing when you think about it, but it was my normal for a long time. It took 4 years to get me out of completely out of chronic pain. But a lot of what we did was working around the problem because I was just a stubborn mule that refused to let it stop me. And we had ongoing issues with a couple of areas in the back. So even when the discs did start to, I don't even know what the technical term is, when they start to manage themselves and you get
like
that
recede
they recede in. Yeah. So with the fact that we didn't do certain things and we were doing all the right things with my rehab and those exercises all the time, we started to see them, improving is probably a better term to use. They did improve. But I still had issues, and I still had a couple that just sat out onto the nerve. So I would have that random contact stuff. Man, it made a lot of things really hard, and it meant that I didn't squat and I did not deadlift. So this is where I guess a lot of people following my journey were always inspired by what I still achieved. And Zenia can attest to this. I was having cortisone injections into my back before I flew on the plane to get to my peak week for my show, which we had managed to prep the entire way through with no squats and no deads. And I didn't put my heels on until the night before my show. Zenia's rubbing CBD oil into my legs and my back. And then I'm working my routine out. I was visualizing it in my head. I only practiced it at 12 o'clock the night before my show and went on to win my world championship for the second time the very next day. So I'm a stubborn mule. I'm going to find a way around things. But we, over time, did manage to work through the problem, not around it, removed me from chronic state of pain. And now I can comfortably say RDLs are my friend again. And I am capable of doing full hip hinging. I don't have, I have underlying dispositions to have problems if I don't look after myself. So I have,
as anyone does with prior injury history, right?
Correct. So I have a prehabilitative focus to what I do. And this leads into, I know something Zenia did want to talk about, which is why we still work together, even though I'm not in a chronic pain state. And we do. And I check in with her frequently. And what I mean by that is I'll randomly send her a message and be like, let's do a session because I haven't seen you for 4 weeks. I just want to run through some stuff. And I'll just literally have her watch my pattern of movement. Because one of the things that did happen when I went through that whole process is you get a bit of a disassociation to your spatial capacity. So you can't always feel where something's tracking or slipping in a different direction. You can't always feel it. You're not always capable of sitting entirely inside the body. And I have incredible mind-body awareness, but there are certain times where it slips a bit. And that's where I use Zen, because she's like my external cue, my external set of eyes. And I work prehabilitatively. So I don't let myself get back to that shit show. I stop myself from doing that by making sure I still tap into her. So it's not, rehab should never be this separate thing to training. Rehab should be your training. Your training should be rehabilitative with a scope to progressively load and move you back to patterns of movement that you have been, unable to access for a period of time. And then it shouldn't stop there, because you should be prehabilitatively preventing yourself from going regressed, you know? So
Yeah.
I think that's probably the biggest key to all of this is, and for the coaches out there that sit in Zenia space, well, that's how you should be approaching a client, is discussing them through the life cycle of their time with you should be, hey, well, we're teammates for life now, in a sense, because I'm here for you once we get you free of pain and movement. And we should probably periodically check in ongoing, even if it's once a quarter or once a year, even. You should be, because I tell you now, most people are going to slip into old habits real quick, and they're going to get into that whole, well, I don't really need to warm up. That dynamic warm up doesn't matter anymore. I'm not in pain. Snap. Next minute, they're back on your table, right? So that's the way people will shortcut shit.
Yeah.
They just do it, and they do it subconsciously. So I think, you know, it's key. It's key to have that focus. It's key to have a long-term focus, and it's key to understand the life cycle of rehabilitation. And this is, as you can hear it's a beast, mate. There's no way I want to spend my time in the weeds doing that with someone when I know I have experts here that I trust, that I can just hand my people safely to, and know that I'm going to get them back. And then periodically I can just get them to take their temperature again and make sure everything's still stacking up good, because that's how I apply it to myself. And, you know, the leader should show the way that something should be done. So my team see me executing in the way that I then ask them to do the same with me on. So they have no issue seeing my specialist, because they've seen the great work that they do with me, and I share it publicly. I have no issues sharing the downsides, the ugly parts, the highs, the lows, and everything in between of my own journey, because, hey, I'm a human too. And I think, you know, sometimes as coaches, we forget to show that side of ourselves. And I think you need to model your behavior that you expect others to be, you know, instructed to follow too. I think you can't dictate to people. You need to lead by example.
Yeah, I love that. I was going to say, like, what would be like an actionable or a take home message, but leading by example and having, even as a coach, we need coaches too, is 100%. Probably a huge thing to sort of finish up on, and just understanding that, you know, we can always learn something from someone, good, bad, or indifferent. And yeah, I think this has been an awesome chat with you, and like I learned some things that I didn't know about you.
It's a lot of fun because it's organic, right? And this is the thing, everyone, we didn't have any questions prior. This was a completely organic, on the fly conversation, and I think they're the best ones, because you really do just, you know, shoot from the hip and you say it how it is. I think what you just said was perfect, because every single one of my coaching team has not just one, but oftentimes multiple coaches themselves. And it is a trait that I specifically look for in someone. And I would never want to be coached by, or put myself trust myself in the hands of someone that isn't willing to be coached themselves. I think that's an amazing finish point, because being coachable is everything. You can't ask others to be coachable if you can't be coachable yourself.
Totally. So the wonderful Ali, how can people find you, learn about your journey, and potentially work with you?
Oh my God, there's so many places. Look, Instagram is always the best, which is Alicia Gowans _WBFF Pro.
And we'll put the spelling of that in show notes.
Yeah, so that's the best part, because you'll follow all of my stuff and you'll see my content. I'm true to myself. So how I speak to you, should you meet me in person, will be exactly the same sort of language and representation you'll get on my social media. I am not a, you know, bubblegum, all filters, everything's perfect and rainbows and unicorns kind of influencer. I'm not like that. So Instagram's the best. And then second to that, look, my podcast is a fantastic way to learn quite a lot of different things across the wellness space. So if you go to Queen Diva's podcast, we'll put the link for that as well. There are a lot of episodes. You can find the title of anything that you would like to learn more about, or delve into, or listen to. And it gives you a lot of insight, if you were looking to work with me, as to how I operate as a coach, you know, how I think as an athlete, and, you know, some of the thoughts that I have on specific things inside of the industry too. So awesome. I would say those two places are probably best.
Oh, amazing. And then the only other thing that I would add is anyone who is looking to upskill specifically at this point in time, their anatomy, obviously mentioning earlier, our education masterclass on the anatomy of exercise shoulder edition is coming up on the 22nd of February. We have live and a live replay, but we have a ton coming up. There's going to be a course that's following that as well.
Amazing.
Yeah. And then obviously our 6 months mentorships come around quicker than you know it. So there's always opportunities to apply for that.
Amazing.
And I think
anyone listening to this, you won't be disappointed should you engage in that sort of process with Zenia, because she is an absolute crazy level of information inside of that big, brightly colored head, and you won't be led astray. I think also too, if you ever get the chance to do anything with her in person, I would strongly suggest you take advantage of it, because you'll always walk away having learned at least a couple of things that you didn't know.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ali. I
Thanks,
will
Zen.
talk to you when we train together on Thursday.
See you Thursday.
If you enjoyed this episode, it'd honestly mean the world to us if you could share it with a friend or on your socials, follow and leave a quick review so that we can bring you more real, raw and uncensored stories from industry leaders. We also love hearing your feedback, so please DM us on Instagram at Swift Coaches Academy if you have suggestions for future guests or topics. Until next time, and in whatever you do, move swiftly.